Hey YouTube, what's going on? Today I'm going to show you guys how we're going to make this, a predator bust, out of a crappy, old, cheap $15 mask. In order to do that, it's time for some alchemy.
Behold, my stuff.
Alright, so this was a cheap-ass mask. It was one of those latex ones from, I think, 2018 that nobody wanted. A friend of mine hooked me up with this, and I said to myself, you know what? I could probably use that as an experiment to see if I can improve my airbrushing. So I wanted to repaint it and make it look like a decent predator mask. That turned into, I probably should put a warbler shell in it. I should probably put some wire in it and buff it out with some foam clay. I should probably reshape it. I should probably replace all the mandibles. I should put resin teeth in. I should put eyes in it. And the next thing you know, it turned into a much bigger project than I thought it was going to be. But it was, in fact, a test of my airbrushing. I blew my compressor out working on this project, bought a better one, got even better at airbrushing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I took the latex mask, turned it into this, and then I'm going to have a second video where I turn it into the full bust, where I incorporate the dreadlocks, everything else. But for what I got up through now, I'm going to show you how we did that. So, let's see how we did it.
So there's a few things that we're going to have to do right away. Number one is we're going to have to cut this away, these weird fake dreads. There's some trademarks up here that we're going to have to grind away with a Dremel and get that nice and smooth. We're going to cut out all these rubber teeth because these latex teeth are terrible. And they're not the right shape and they don't look good at all. There is also the fact that I want to replace these teeth with some castings of my Renfield teeth, because you can see even just throwing in those Renfield teeth, these are going to look so much better. You know, they just look nicer. I do like that they just have the two big teeth there, so I will just kind of use some castings of vampire teeth that I have. But I'm going to make some Renfield teeth to replace all this. And then I may cut this out on the inside so that I can fold this mouth up a little bit. I may do a cut through here so that I can close this mouth a little bit and bring the pincers in. We have dremeled off the name up on top, so we got rid of all that. We sliced up the mouth so that we can reshape this and kind of remake this the way we want. This is going to give me the flexibility to change the jaw angle, bring in the sunken cheeks a little bit, and reposition these how I like it. Reposition these mandibles. If I don't like the way they look, I may just completely cut them off and redo them entirely. There's a couple other things that I can use to make them. And the other thing we did is we put in a warbler shell in the top so that the crown here is going to hold its shape, so that when it's on your face, it sits comfortably, because the other thing is we're going to build a structure in that holds the dreadlocks, and we're going to need to attach it to something, and so that's going to give us a base to attach it to. Next step is to prime this thing.
Once we have cut off all of these horrible little tusks, we've gone in and attached new mandibles. Now, I left the rubber tusks on. I've gone in and chopped up the mouth a little bit. This will all be adjusted to my liking, but we use these little fingertips, and we've replaced the crap ones with some slightly longer mandibles. And we've gone in and attached those to create more of that classic shape. We've cut away a lot of the inside of the mouth and folded it in on itself and re-glued it to give more of that scoop shape. We're now going to bulk out the jaw with some foam clay and some armature wire and run that through the mandibles so that we have the ability to manipulate that a little bit.
All right. So now that we sort of let the base coat dry. Again, Plasti-Dip is not the best to use because it does rub off, but that's the other reason I did it, is because if I totally screw up this paint job, I can just rub it all off. But if I like it, I can seal it 9 ways from Sunday, and then it won't rub off. So the next thing to do is we've got to bolster out the jawline a little bit. We've got to create some controllable shape. And so I've done one side already, and we're now going to do the other. But this isn't going to work until the foam clay dries, so I'm really not going to be able to manipulate this until like tomorrow, and then I got to cover this with something so that the wire doesn't pop out. But what we're essentially going to do is we're going to stuff a bunch of wire into these areas so that we can manipulate and shape the mandibles, the orbital line, and the jaw line. So that's the next step of what we're doing. We also may need to pop out some of these mandibles to do this correctly, which may need to happen, but we're going to find out. So let's go ahead and get started on this odd process. So the first thing I like to do is pick up some armature wire, and we're going to kind of test where the wire is and needs to go. Now I need it to go in and then once it's in, I need to see how far up will it make it up into the warbler, because that's where I need to anchor the damn thing. And it looks like it will. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there. And now I'm just going to kind of bend this shape to what I want and tuck it behind the warbler, and I will reheat and melt the warbler onto it so that it stays. Okay. Actually, I think what we're going to start with is pushing some foam clay into the mandible. So in order to do this, we can use the armature wire to do this, but you got to kind of just shove it in there. And we're going to want it level later, so we can sort that later. So now I got to get some bonding agent stuff in, because we're going to glue the crap out of this. We're going to drop some foam clay in here. You can use whatever makes you happy. I'm not married to any one version of this. I want to keep it as much out of the eye socket area as possible. And as you can see, the way this was glued was not even. So there's a bit of a dip. So this side is going to have a little bit more to manipulate than the other. And that's okay. So we took it off. Stuff it with wire. Stuff the wire in. So it's all the way in there. We know the way it's going to bend. And we will deal with the reattachment later. So now we got to get it comfortably along the edge. Of that, so that this has a nice, reasonably flexible, bendable shape. I'm going to twist that in just ever so slightly. And that looks pretty good. So now we need to do some glue and do some foam clay so that it stays in place. I think that's about as even as I'm going to be able to make it until later. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that is literally maxed out. Okay. So now we have armature wire in the teeth, and we can manipulate the shape of the teeth. And that'll come in handy later. Now we're just going to sand off a little bit and prep it for some airbrushing. So I'm just going to go grab some white and cover some of these areas. And we're going to go from there. All right, the first step we're going to do here is we're going to airbrush on a very, very washed out canary yellow. And you're going to use, I don't know, I think I did like 10 PSI. I just did about 50% on the flow of paint. So I pulled back on the two-way brush about halfway. And I varied that a little bit, but I never went like full all the way back. And when I do, you'll see that I make a spatter and then I got to clean it up. But circle motions, irregular motions, clockwise, counterclockwise, seesaw, figure eights, things like that. And vary your distance and just try to create some irregular coverage. I'm not really worried about getting in the crevices or on the surfaces or highlights or anything like that. This is pretty much going to be total mask coverage for the most part. I want a good foundation on the edges because that is where my orange and my browns are going to sit, so I want that color to build up. I'm a little bit more sparing in the middle because there's going to be less overlay from the other colors for that. So really, it's just about getting it everywhere. I probably could have done this with a brush, to be honest with you, but this was really about learning how to do better work with an airbrush, so I'm sort of taking the long route with this. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to cover the whole thing in varied amounts of yellow and move on to subsequent colors. All right, once I'm happy with the yellow, switch airbrushes, and we're going to go with some orange. My orange is a little bit more like a creamsicle. I mixed in some raw sienna, some of that yellow, Vallejo airbrush thinner, you know, usual stuff. So the wash that I used was pretty much straight out of the tube that I bought it in, but I had to mix the orange, so had some clogging issues and things like that I had to deal with. It's kind of a pain in the butt. I haven't quite got a hang of it yet. So orange goes in the mouth first. That's going to be the base under which my pink sits on. So that'll take some of the bite out of the pink that I use later in the mouth. Why are predator mouths pink, by the way? If their blood is green, wouldn't there be no pink flesh to their their look? Wouldn't it be green? And neither here nor there. So starting from the outside, working in, same spiraling, loopy pattern, whatnot. This one paying more attention that the deeper areas should get more intense orange, because I'm going to use this to start building up the shadow and the three-dimensional look of the mask. So really focusing on my low areas, around the eyes, things like that, around the jawbone, but very, very limited as I move up to the mandibles in the front of the face. I don't want a lot of color there. I want to keep the bleached look. I am going to go back and bleach it at the end with some... what is that? Parchment and diluted parchment, and just sort of soften everything a little bit. But yeah, so this is going to start building on top of the yellow. So the creamsicle look will get a little bit more of a brightness from the yellow that's underneath it. But because that's all on a base of bleach, like the parchment, the bone color, it's going to dull some of that neon, and you're going to get to this sort of ugly, like putrefaction-y skin look, which is very Predator-esque, so. So, brown. Now, I mentioned I blew my compressor out earlier in the video. I had been filming when the compressor blew out, and there were so many expletives and not fun words that I decided that clip was not worth it. So I wasn't able to salvage some of the beginning of that, and you didn't miss much. I did the cranial ridge, I did the under the eyes, and I started doing the crevices on the Triceratops piece up there. So I just picked up where I left off once I got home with the new compressor. My wife was like, let's just go get a new one because you're being a baby. So, again, orbital bone, jawline, not into the mandible so much, and low areas. Then I'm going to start adding brown dots. And the reason I did that was I wanted to get some irregular looking skin pattern, but I was using way too much air pressure and I got spatter. So that didn't look so great. So I went to cover that up later. I'm not really good at making like fine lines and like full dots where the edges aren't fuzzy and things. So I haven't really done that. And you'll see I'm going to go and try to make up for that. Now I'm flicking the thing a lot, and I was told that if you do that, it sends out spatter, and the spatter will give it more of like a freckly, organic skin texture look. I really wasn't getting that, so I don't think I was doing it right. Maybe I needed the air pressure to be higher, pump it up to like 30 or something. I don't know. But I'll keep practicing and see what I do with it. But it definitely looked better than the stock look that I had before. So going in with the brown and doing the initial darknesses. This is the last of the skin tone, because once I go in with the black, that's going to be a totally different thing. Alright, here's where things get sticky. So up till now, I've pretty much just using acrylic paint with Vallejo airbrush thinner and a few drops of flow improver to try to make sure it comes out. When I did the black, that was different. That was a straight black airbrush, made for airbrush black. I still needed to thin it. But I mixed in some gloss medium. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want the black to totally flatten out the shine that I had, and that was something that one of the Predator builders had mentioned they did. So I tried that, but I constantly was getting my airbrush gunky. And in the end, it wasn't as glossy as I wanted, so I ended up covering the whole thing with a glaze, an airspray glaze. But it was something that I wanted to change the nature of what the black was. Instead of that really matte finish that acrylic black does, I was hoping the airbrush black with some gloss medium would be a little brighter, a little sweatier. So I really went in under the eyes, really blacked out like the whole eye area. You really don't get a lot of detail there. So on the lower part of the upper ridge of the eyes, under eyes, through all the low points, the cranial ridge, all that stuff, and then dots. Lots of varying sizes of dots and things. I didn't have a pattern. I didn't work from the outside in or the top down, like, you know, the Jungle Predator looks, but yeah, I was experimenting, so I just did it over the whole face and just said, let's see how it comes out. So that is kind of where I went with the black, and again, very little black in the mouth area at all, just the dots. I didn't, you know, around the tusks a little bit, but pardon me. I did not want to overly black the thing because you can't unblack. So that's kind of where I was going with it. In general, you could see the shape is moving in the right direction. Alright, now it's time to paint some of this inner mouth. I still hadn't figured out how I wanted to handle the mouth, if I wanted to do a mesh or something else. I ended up using another piece of latex to just close the mouth. But what I had, I wanted to color. So what I did was, I did that straight magenta that I talked about, but I blasted the crap out of it with air so that it would run. And the reason I wanted to do that was the air would push the droplets in weird patterns and stuff and sort of make like veins, I was hoping, because I ain't getting in there with an airbrush or anything and doing veins. I'm not that good. So I was like, well, maybe I can get the air to do the job for me. So I made the wash super liquidy and blasted it. And because I did that orange initial coat, it wouldn't need a ton of paint. It would just need like a hue of it. But what was really funny was the magenta stained really quickly. And so where I thought most of it would dab away with a paper towel or something, it really didn't. So at this point, you could see when I switch over to the neon green that I had to go in and sort of, wet paper towel, get rid of a lot of that paint and, really lighten it up. But the neon green was cool. It's a chameleon paint green, and I wanted the wound to have that. The mask has a wound. It's asymmetrical. It looks cool. I just wanted it to have it. Next thing we need to do is put some eyes in this bust. We're not going to be able to wear it as a mask, so we're going to have to put some fake eyes in it. It's a little small for my head, so we're going to make a nice little cool bust. So what I did was I took some latex eyes that I already had from another mask, I cut them out, and I pushed them into some silicone putty to make an impression so that I could cast them out of foam clay. I could do a vacuum form and do some castings so that they're latex and make the whole thing latex, but to be honest with you, for the eyeballs, foam clay works just as good. So now I gotta make eyeballs, and so the Predator has yellow eyes with black filled in. So what we're gonna do is we've gone in and plasti dipped this with black and sprayed it with matte black, and I'm gonna go in and just make a white iris on both of these, and then we're gonna detail it up, and we'll add the dot after. We're not going to do a white light dot, because that's not going to help. That's going to make it look cartoony, so we're just going to cover it with a buttload of gloss, and we'll let real light cover that for us. So I got to make a loopy bit here. So let's go ahead and adjust my lighting. Let's adjust. And this is super annoying because I have to make a very convincing circle. I already don't like this because there's a stray. Yeah. There's stray strands coming out here, which piss me off. So it needs to be a fairly sizable circle. And like I said, if I get white in more spaces than I want, I can go back in and deal with that. The easiest way for me to make the circle will be to outline this with a pen. after the fact. That's pretty big. Now, the other thing is, figure out where the middle's going to be. So once I get them like this, I put them in the mask and make sure I figure out how I want to align it in the mask. And then I make a note of it on the back so I remember where the damn middle of it is. Because you really don't want to make your eye and then find out it was upside down and now he's looking down instead of up or whatever. Like, that'll screw you up. This brush is wet. This is not dry brushing. I would not dry brush this. I recommend doing this with a wet palette. Some people are good enough that they can do this with an airbrush. I tested some eyes. That did not go well. So, not quite my skill set yet. I will continue to practice, but nah, I'm not good at it. So we're going to brush this up, and, you know, my art degree was in traditional art, so I am going to probably be more confident using my hands for this stuff then. How does that look? Not quite what I want yet. This needs to come down. And like I said, I can shrink this. That's a good start. All right, now that we did that, we're going to dry it. Oh, I forgot, these are not heavy. But that burns my hands. That was a stupid move. Ah, it burns. All right. Next, I'm going to take a finer. Yeah, this will work. This is my my miniature Stumpy, my miniature dry brushing Stumpy brush. And I'm going to want to get this just in a place where I could start coating it with yellow. Actually, I want to let that coagulate a little bit. So I'm going to drop some yellow here. All right, and this is where we're going to kind of be a little rough with it. Again, I want it streaky. I don't want it even. I want it to retain a lot of its white undertone, the bone that I put in. And using the brush that's a little harder, with streaks like that, will sort of give it more of an iris texture look to it. All right. Now, the last thing that we need to do is we need to do the iris. Now, doing an iris is doing the pupil, excuse me, is a little bit of a pain in the ass, and there's a couple of ways that work pretty good for that. One of the ways that
works really well is using the back end of a brush. You dip it in black paint, you just sort of smush. So let's see if I can do this without ruining. That one's a little wonky, but I think it will be okay. I think that will work. All right, now I need to hit it with some heat and dry it off. And I used, actually, now that I think about it, I used a diluted black. So if I hit this with the heat gun, it actually might spread it out. Although that could actually work in my favor. We're going to experiment. Let's see what it does. Let's see what happens when I bring the heat gun in. So far, it's just burning my hand, so nice and easy. Ow, that hurts. Yowza! All right. Next is we got to clean up the irises. And for that, we need a trusty pen. Let's see what trusty pens I have hanging around that can help me with this. These are the best ones to use, these fine liner ones, but I screw around with this so much, I don't even know if there's any ink left in this thing. We're going to see. So the goal here is to doing just enough. Just enough that it will accomplish what I want. Now I want to make the circle around the iris and clean up and tighten up how round this is. And I want there to be that extra black up top. Too much. And I can go back in with some yellow and clean that up. Let that dry. I'm going to have to clean up a little bit. That's okay. So since I know this is super thin, I think I'm going to do the upper with this super thin. All right, so the eyes are in. And obviously it's not perfect, but the right eye, this one over here, a little cockeyed, a little wall-eyed. So he's a little bit of lazy-eyed, but overall, I think this was a pretty successful attempt. I could pull this out and try to scooch it over just a bit and tighten it up just a little bit. I may not. We'll see how it goes. So, last looks, it's got that green shimmer from the injury. The mandibles are posable. It's got a nice full jawline and orbital line now. Those resin teeth really pop, which I love. And again, those Renfield cast teeth, we hacked them up and put them in the way we wanted.
These are actually cast from a xenomorph claw. So there's actually xenomorph claws for his fangs. And we hacked up Palpatine's throat from one of my old retired masks. And redid the inner jaw so that the shape was a little better. And yeah, we have a decent look. And now with this Warbler base, we're going to have something nice and easy to attach the dreadlocks to. So that's last looks on this. And overall, I'd say it's a massive, massive improvement. The yellows, the oranges, the browns, everything is still visible. So I would say it was a successful attempt at repainting, and it was a good learning process. So that's what we did, and that looks pretty good.
All right, so that's how we did it. We did all the things that we needed to do, and hopefully you guys get a little bit of something out of that. We're going to turn it into a full display bust, and we'll probably get that in, I don't know, a couple weeks, month, something like that. Depends on what my downtime looks like. But for now, this guy's all set, and the process of alchemy is turning one thing into another, and I like to turn crap into pure gold.